Hello friends, you have come to listen to a story. Let's start the story. Miss Clara Bennett was the kind of English teacher students never forgot. She had a passion for poetry, a soft spot for Shakespeare, and a smile that made even the most reluctant readers turn a page. Every morning, she walked into Maplewood High School with her hair tied up in a loose bun, a novel under one arm, and a coffee cup in hand. One rainy Monday, a new teacher joined the faculty, Mr. James Carter, the new history teacher. He was charming, well-read, and had a quiet confidence that intrigued Clara. Their first conversation happened in the teacher's lounge over a shared appreciation for Jane Austen. "I always thought Darcy was misunderstood," James said, taking a sip of his tea. Clara raised an eyebrow. "You're either brave or crazy to defend Darcy to an English teacher." From then on, conversations became lunch dates turned into coffee after school, and soon, they were strolling through bookstores on weekends, debating literature and history like characters from a novel themselves. One evening, after a school play where Clara's students performed Romeo and Juliet, James waited for her outside the auditorium. In his hand, he held a small, worn book, Pride and Prejudice. "I figured if I'm going to love an English teacher," he said with a grin, "I should read the whole thing." Clara laughed, her heart full. "Well, Mr. Carter, I think that's the most romantic line I've ever heard." Under the soft glow of the streetlights, he leaned in and whispered, "Then maybe it's time I wrote my own chapter with you." And in that moment, between literature and lesson plans, two teachers found a story all their own. Spring arrived at Maplewood High, and the campus buzzed with energy, senior projects, prom planning, and the scent of fresh blossoms from the cherry trees lining the walkway. For Clara, the air felt different this year. It wasn't just spring, it was something new, something warmer than the sun on her back as she walked to class. It was James. Their relationship blossomed quietly. They shared morning coffees, traded books with notes scribbled in the margins, and left each other tiny poems tucked into desk drawers and lesson plans. One morning, Clara arrived in her classroom to find a post-it note stuck to her copy of Wuthering Heights. "Heathcliff may have been dramatic, but I'd walk through a storm for you too." She smiled, her cheeks pink as cherry petals. Their romance wasn't just made of grand gestures, it was in the little things. James staying late to help her grade essays, Clara sneaking into the history classroom to write, "You're my favorite subject," on the whiteboard. But of course, every good love story has its challenge. A prestigious school in another state offered James a head of department position, more pay, more prestige, more pressure. He hadn't told Clara yet. He wasn't sure how. Until one Friday, after a staff meeting, he took her hand and led her to the old library where they first sat together during teacher orientation. The room smelled of old books and memories. "I got an offer," he said, gently. "Out of state. It's everything I thought I wanted. But now, everything I want might be here." Clara looked down, silent for a moment, then stepped closer. "You taught me that history is full of brave choices," she whispered. "So make the one that feels right, not just smart." James looked into her eyes, full of uncertainty and love. "What if what feels right is you?" Clara smiled. "Then write that chapter with me." That night, under the same stars that once lit their hallway chats and late-night walks, James turned down the job offer. Because sometimes the best future is the one you didn't plan, but felt deeply. A year passed, and Maplewood High grew used to seeing Miss Bennett and Mr. Carter together, whether they were chaperoning school dances, planning interdisciplinary lessons, or sneaking smiles in the hallway. Students joked about how their teachers were straight out of a rom-com, and even the principal, Mr. Dean, referred to them as the school's unofficial power couple. But love, like literature, has its rising actions, its turning points. In the fall, budget cuts loomed over the school. Programs were at risk, including Clara's beloved poetry club, which she'd spent years building. The school board considered it non-essential. Clara was heartbroken. "How do you explain to people that poetry is essential?" she asked James one evening, sitting in his living room, papers scattered around them. James took her hand. "We don't explain it, we show them." So together, they organized a Night of Words and Wonders, an after-school event where students performed original poems, scenes from Shakespeare, historical reenactments, and literary monologues. James even stepped on stage himself, performing a dramatic reading from Pride and Prejudice, leaving the crowd in stitches and Clara laughing with tears in her eyes. The night was a massive success. Parents, alumni, and even the skeptical board members were moved to applause, and the poetry club was saved. Later that night, Clara found James waiting outside her classroom. The hallway was quiet, lockers lined like silent witnesses. He held a small book in his hands again. This time, it wasn't Austen. It was a leather-bound notebook. "I've been writing," he said. "About us. Our story." Clara flipped it open. Inside were pages of their moments. The first coffee, the first argument about Bronte verses. Austen, the night of the school play, their first kiss under the autumn leaves. Each chapter was titled with something only they would understand. And then, one final page. The next chapter, "Will you marry me?" Clara looked up, heart full, eyes brimming with happy tears. James was down on one knee, a small ring in his hand, glowing under the classroom light. "Yes," she whispered, 1,000 times, "yes." And so, their story continued, not as teacher and teacher, but as partners, as co-authors of a love that had bloomed in the heart of a high school, built on shared passions, laughter, and the belief that sometimes the greatest stories start with a simple hello in the teacher's lounge. The wedding was small, held under the oak tree in the courtyard of Maplewood High, the place where their story truly began. Clara walked down an aisle of flower petals, her white dress swaying in the soft spring breeze, students and colleagues smiling proudly from their seats. James waited under the tree, nervous in his gray suit, holding a slim, worn book, the notebook, the one where he had written every chapter of their journey. Instead of traditional vows, they exchanged words from their hearts. Clara took a deep breath and said, "You taught me that history isn't just facts, it's feeling. That love can be found between paragraphs and in the quiet pauses of everyday life. I vow to be your favorite reader, and your partner in every story still to come." James followed, voice steady but eyes misty. "You made poetry feel like home. I vow to laugh with you, to fight for you, and to write a life full of meaning, beauty, and a little bit of mischief. You're my best chapter, Clara." Their students past and present cheered louder than any guests ever had. And when they kissed beneath the oak tree, it wasn't just a wedding, it was the climax of a love story that still had so much left to write. A few years later, Clara and James Carter shared more than a last name, they shared a classroom. They started a program called Story and Society, a blend of English and history where students analyzed both literature and the events that shaped it. Their banter, their teamwork, and their passion made them legendary. Every once in a while, a student would ask, "How did you two fall in love?" Clara would smile and say, "Over coffee and Shakespeare." James would add, "And a little bit of Austen." And when school ended, and the halls emptied, they'd walk hand in hand past the lockers where their story first unfolded, proof that sometimes the best love stories aren't found in books. They're written in real life, one lesson at a time. The soft ticking of the classroom clock mixed with the hum of a quiet spring morning. Clara sat at her desk, rubbing her growing belly, a copy of Anne of Green Gables resting on top of the lesson plans she had barely touched. James peeked through the doorway and knocked gently. "Mrs. Carter, you're glowing. And you're also supposed to be on maternity leave." Clara smiled. "I know. I didn't want to miss the poetry showcase today. These kids worked so hard." James walked over, placed a hand on her shoulder, and leaned down to kiss her temple. "They'll understand. And I'll film every second. But first, let's get you out of here before our daughter decides to debut during someone's sonnet." They laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet room like music. Clara had never imagined herself as a mother before she met James. But now, the idea of building a family with him felt like the greatest story she'd ever get to write. A year later, the halls of Maplewood were quieter now. Clara had returned part-time, James was still full of energy, and their daughter Lila Rose was already known by every student, thanks to the photo on James's desk and the stories he told in class. One rainy afternoon, Clara sat in the library with Lila nestled in her arms, reading aloud from The Secret Garden while James organized the shelves nearby. "Do you think she'll love books as much as we do?" she asked softly. James glanced over, smiling. "She doesn't stand a chance. Look who her parents are." They both laughed, and as thunder rumbled outside, Lila let out a tiny coo, as if agreeing with her dad. Clara and James retired on the same day 25 years after they first met. The school held a surprise farewell assembly. Former students returned, some now teachers themselves, some bringing their own kids. A student read aloud from a book James had helped them write. Another shared a poem they once workshopped in Clara's poetry club. When it was their turn to speak, Clara held James's hand and said, "We didn't just teach literature and history. We lived it. And every one of you is part of our story." James followed, his voice a little shaky, "And though the final bell may ring for us here, in our hearts, we'll always be Mr. and Mrs. Carter from Maplewood High." Tears, laughter, standing ovations. They walked out of the school building together one last time, hand in hand, hearts full. Because some love stories don't end. Subscribe to the channel to hear more stories like this, friends. Thank you.